Good afternoon. Welcome to Capital Account. I'm Lauren Lister here in Washington, D.C. These are your headlines for October 10th, 2012. He is a UK politician with a U.S. following and a Eurosceptic party that has seen its support grow, moving it from the fringe to a position of being a viable mainstream alternative. He's known for not mincing his words. UKIP leader and MEP Nigel Farage is here in our studio today for a sit-down. And the IMF says Europe's banks may need to sell as much as $4.5 trillion in assets through 2013, 18% more than it previously estimated. This is if policymakers fall short of their pledges to curb the crisis. Now, this forecast is for a painful deleveraging that would crimp growth. So, how much pain is still left in the Eurozone, and who is left to pick up that bill? And Jamie Dimon was in Washington today at the Council on Foreign Relations. We're weeks away from the one-year anniversary of MF Global's collapse, with JP Morgan being a major counterparty and custodial bank of MF Global. Capital Account asked, when did Jamie Dimon find out about the collapse?
Oh, you're taxing my memory at this point.
And did you have any conversation with Mr. Corzine?
No luck on that one, but we did take him to task on the Bear Stearns acquisition and the civil fraud suit. We'll show you what he said later in the show. Let's get to today's Capital Account. In the most gray and uninspiring of contexts, that of burgeoning EU bureaucracy, our next guest has managed to amass a highlight reel second to none, turning his European parliamentary position into a bully pulpit for a growing movement of Eurosceptics. Take a look.
You are all in denial. By any objective measure, the euro is a failure. Just who the hell do you think you people are? You are very, very dangerous people indeed. Your obsession with creating this euro state means that you're happy to destroy democracy. So what are you saying? That this isn't quite as bad as the USSR? I had totally underestimated the complete fanaticism, Mr. Barroso, of you, your College of Commissioners and the European Central Bank. Yes, it'll mean you'll lose your job, Mr. Barroso, but apart from that, why can't we do things as mature democracies? Yes, I want you sacked, Mr. Schulz, as well. I want you all fired. You have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. And the question that I want to ask, that we're all going to ask is, who are you?
Well, now everyone knows who he is because that video went viral, and everyone knows who Nigel Farage is, leader of the UK Independence Party, member of European Parliament. These speeches over the years have gone viral on the internet, and Mr. Farage has garnered a following not only at home, but here in the U.S. While at home, his party has gone from fringe to a force to be reckoned with. Nigel Farage joins me now live. We're so thrilled to have you in studio. Thanks for being here.
Pleased to be here, and thank you for showing my best clips.
We really did like your highlight reel. So much to choose from, hard to get it whittled down. So let's just start with you. Every time you give a speech on the floor of Parliament, when you come on this show and do an interview, it goes viral in the financial blogosphere here in the U.S. Why do you think your message resonates so much here in America?
Well, the global markets are all interconnected. You know, what happens particularly in New York and Chicago is totally linked in to what is happening in the Eurozone. And the Eurozone crisis is hanging heavily across the whole of the financial and investment community of the world. So people are really interested to hear what's going on. And what they get from Mr. Barroso and Van Rompuy and all the other ghastly people in Brussels that no one's ever voted for, what they get is this diet of, there's no problem, chaps, we're going to have a summit next Thursday, it'll all be sorted out. Well, there have been 21 summits over the last 2 years, and here we are today with Cyprus on the verge of needing a bailout, the Spanish position, frankly, looking perilous. And I think the reason my stuff goes viral is that I'm giving not just a counter-argument, but I think, and I believe, and I hope, a pragmatic economic alternative.
Well, and kind of what you're getting at is there's a bull market for truth. There's a bull market for getting past the BS and the rhetoric. What I found interesting was even on the mainstream networks in the U.S., you've been on CNBC and Fox this week, I feel that you were more well received there than maybe you would be by Mr. Barroso and by some of the press in Europe.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it's even into the mainstream in the U.S. You think this is, do you agree, first of all?
Well, I think, look, anybody that looks at economics from a fundamental perspective is going to say this Eurozone should never have been put together the way that it has been, and that frankly, it can't last. The only question is, how long will the agony go on for? And my worry, as you showed in that last clip of mine, my worry is that the political will to keep this thing propped up is so fanatical that it could be many, many years. It could be up to a decade that this crisis goes on.
One decade before what we see an exit?
Well, I said no. I think other exits will happen first. But the reality is that the whole European project was put together as part of a Franco-German pact. It was done with honourable intentions, namely to stop war, but it misunderstood that people don't want to be given a new identity and that you should never create a state without consent. But here we are, and no one's noticed. We've all watched Greece versus Germany, Spain versus Germany, and we've talked about the gap in competitiveness terms that has grown between them. What no one's noticed in the last 2 years is that gap between France and Germany is getting wider. We've now got a new French president whose views on economics, frankly, are mad, because the first three things that he does on becoming president, he reduces the retirement age from 62 to 60, he ups the minimum wage by more than the rate of inflation, and then he introduces a hate tax
75%
of 75%, and he says if there were any entrepreneurs left in Paris, please catch the next Eurostar out. And because of that, I think this gap between France and Germany will get bigger, and the awful reality for the people that wanted to build a European state is I don't think in the end even France and Germany can survive together in same side economic and monetary union.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, that's bold, but let's back up a little bit, because have even you been surprised that we haven't seen a Greek exit yet, or that despite all of the pain, we've still seen Greeks go to the polls and, yes, give more support to anti-Euro parties, but ultimately re-elect mainstream parties, and that the Euro architects, despite the cost of these bailouts, still seem committed to keeping Greece in. Have you been surprised
yes,
on this line?
I have to say that I would have thought that by now the markets would have forced Greece out, and it hasn't happened. And I think Draghi's statement that we saw over the summer, the ECB president, when he said, we will do whatever it takes. And kind of they mean it. I mean, they are prepared to risk everything and more to defend this project. The clue was a meeting that I had last year with Angela Merkel. And I said to her, Chancellor, wouldn't it be kinder to your taxpayers, who've just spent 20 years paying for Eastern Germany to be reintegrated into Western Germany, wouldn't it be kinder to them to stop having to sign a blank cheque in perpetuity? And wouldn't it be a liberation for Greece to leave the euro, get the drachma back with a big devaluation and an opportunity to trade their way back to some sort of sanity?
Well, what did she say?
She said, no, Mr. Farage, if Greece leaves the euro, other countries will leave too, and that will be the end of our European dream.
So you think it's the fear of the dominoes?
But it's absolutely, that was what she was saying. But what she's also really saying is this: we don't care. We don't care that youth unemployment is nearly 60%. We don't care that 25% of private companies have gone bust in the last 5 years. We frankly don't care if the whole of Greece starves, as long as we maintain our Euro project. And that is why I think these people running Europe are bad people. I think they're dangerous people. And we saw a specimen, I think, in Athens yesterday of the future. If you take away from people their ability to vote to change their futures, they will turn nasty.
But they did vote for their futures, and they re-elected mainstream parties.
Well, actually, there wasn't a single opposition party.
Well,
Syriza were arguing about the terms of the bailouts, but they were not saying Greece should leave the euro. Nobody was saying Greece should leave the euro. It's as if the political class in Greece and in Spain and in Portugal are like rabbits in the headlights of an oncoming car. No one's got the self-confidence or the courage.
So you think everybody's terrified of the alternative?
Yes.
To sticking with these measures?
I think if somebody comes along, if a serious business figure in Greece was to come along and say, look, this will be painful, but hey, it's painful anyway.
Right.
We may suffer inflation, it may be difficult for the first year or two, but actually the only hope we've got is that we get our currency back, we're able to become much more competitive again. I think once that leadership is given, the people would follow, but at the moment, it's absent.
Okay, and what of if this does continue? We just saw a report from the IMF coming out saying that if policymakers aren't able to fulfill all of their promises that they have given, that banks will have to deleverage, if you can even call it a deleveraging, because they've gotten bailed out thus far. $4.5 trillion in assets. At this point, what are the consequences of that kind of deleveraging, and who's left to bail the banks out with the court becoming more and more weak?
The IMF.
The
IMF, which had done a good job since 1945, has now been hijacked. You know, it may be here in Washington, but effectively it's become the overseas bailout office for the euro. And if things go badly wrong, the IMF will be expected to put huge amounts of money in, and that, of course, includes America. Yeah. And I think there should be a bigger debate in America about, you know, should they still be putting 18% of this money into the euro bailouts via the IMF? So, I mean, I'm pretty unimpressed with all the IMF does.
Well, and it's interesting because that might be a discussion in Washington, but I don't think you'll ever see a mainstream news report, oh, everybody in the U.S. needs to worry about the money that the government's giving to the IMF. I'm wondering if you have been surprised, because you've been here all week. Is there a lack of knowledge of the nuances of Europe amongst people in the U.S., would you say?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I've met, over the last couple of days, you know, some people that are very senior, very knowledgeable people, who kind of sort of think that the European Union is just some sort of free trade agreement. No, but really...
If it just was, there wouldn't be these problems.
You in Britain, you're not in the euro, so what's the problem? And there is a lack of understanding that the European Court of Justice is supreme over our own courts in our own countries, that even in the case of Britain, which is outside the euro, 75% of our laws are made somewhere else. There is incomprehension when you tell them that the Parliament has got 3 homes and it travels around like a circus, and that the budget hasn't been signed off by the auditors for the last 17 years in a row. I think there is, through much of the American media, not much knowledge about what's really going on over there.
Do you think that's dangerous, given the magnitude of Europe's problems? Right now,
I think it's changing, and I'll tell you why. Because when I meet the financial community over here, they do know what's going on.
Because they've got money at stake.
They know what's going on. And I think events like yesterday, when a German chancellor, I mean, Germany is a big, important country, when a German chancellor turns up in Athens to be met by people wearing swastikas and giving Nazi salutes, I think the media say, goodness me, what on earth is happening here? So I think things are changing. Yeah,
it is when you see the Molotov cocktails or the protests that the U.S. media pays attention, despite so much more of import going on. You know, I have to ask, you give these colorful speeches on the floor. You do not mince your words. Is the relationship with the other EU members of parliament and bureaucrats, is it as it would appear to be, given how you are on the floor in private? Or are you chumming with Van Rompuy and you go have a beer at the pub after being fined thousands of euros for...
it's not good.
Criticizing
No, it's not good at all.
No beers with Van Rompuy?
Absolutely not. And I wouldn't want to have a drink with him, frankly. It's not that I disagree with these people. You know, I mean, I know people, you know, from the left of politics, and I might be more free market, and those guys you can talk to, disagree with, have a beer with, no problem. These people, it isn't that I disagree, they're bad people.
These people, you mean the bureaucrats?
I mean the people leading
Brussels.
the European project, and Barroso and Van Rompuy are at the top. They are out to destroy democracy, which is something that was so important that those that went before us actually went to war to defend the very principle of democracy, and these people want to crush it. These people have got this fanatical belief in their project, in their flag, and in building a new state. Well, it isn't going to work. And if they keep the whip hand for too long, I fear there'll be outbreaks of violence all over the Mediterranean.
And we may see more damp rag comments. You may be paying more fines, Mr. Farage.
Well, it's been calculated that if I am rude to Mr. Van Rompuy, and if I'm fined another 63 million times, I personally would have paid for the entire Euro bailout fund.
Oh, all right. We are going to keep you here. We're going to come back after break. More with Nigel Farage in just a minute. Still ahead, Capital Account producer Justine Underhill took on Jamie Dimon during a press conference here in Washington, D.C. this afternoon. Stay tuned to find out what he said. But first, your closing market numbers.
You know how sometimes you see a story and it seems so whole and complete, you think you understand it, and then you glimpse something else. You hear or see some other part of it and realize everything you thought you knew, you don't know? I'm Tom Hartman. Welcome to The Big Picture.